You remember in 2020, the Gucci Chanel stuff in Soho when that was looted.
Well, NYPD is investigating a robbery pattern targeting high-end clothing boutiques.
That looms so much larger in many sort of Bloomberg liberals' imaginations as profoundly more violent in some ways than the original action being protested, right? And I find that really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about the Boston Tea Party as part of that's a political destruction of property. And yet right now it feels like I agree with you. The looting around the 2020 protests was such a huge talking point. It made people so uncomfortable. And I'm curious why, what do you think the root of that is?
I was thinking, that thieves are actually quite highly valorized in narrative, I mean, Aladdin, famously.
A lot of people claim that I exaggerate when I say that these left-wing idiots actually believe that criminals, all of them, are in fact Aladdin. But here you have a New York Times podcast that features Cenk's nephew and this woman from Jezebel, and they're actually making the case in this particular podcast that stealing is something that we actually should culturally accept. And in fact, in many instances we do. And the example that they cite is in fact Aladdin. I don't want to hear anybody, and I mean absolutely anyone, saying I'm exaggerating when I say that these people genuinely believe that criminals are innocent Baba Angel Aladdins, because in reality, they say so themselves. But this podcast, an absolute disaster. And you could tell from the ratio of likes to dislikes, you could tell from the comments, because what this essentially is a bunch of elites. And by the way, you have Cenk's nephew, a multi-millionaire, somebody who has become famous off the internet, and of course a bunch of other people in the journalist class that feel superior to you due to the fact that they're in the coveted media positions that they're in, making the case that we should undermine our society by allowing theft to happen. It's no big deal. In fact, they even have some catchy new terms for it, like micro-looting.
I'm proposing a new term. Micro-looting.
And yes, this is the perfect example of luxury beliefs, because these people never have to suffer the consequences of what they actually advocate for. They are immune to it, and of course, they feel virtuous for taking these positions that, again, regular, ordinary people suffer as a consequence of. So this is what we're going to talk about. This is what we're going to discuss. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
I forgot 4 lemons. And on several occasions, I was like, I'm just going to go back, grab those 4 lemons and get the hell out. And
you should go to prison.
I know. You think they're going to ban me?
They should throw you in jail.
But I didn't feel bad about it at all.
So before we get into the specifics of the moral depravity that we see on display in this New York Times opinion podcast, I want to point out a couple of things that should be obvious, which is both of these individuals, Cenk's nephew and this Gia woman, are people that are in the United States of America due to our failed immigration policies. Gia, whose parents are from the Philippines, was actually born in Canada. She was allowed to immigrate to the United States of America when she was 4 years old, and now that she is a U.S. citizen, she uses the privilege of being in this great nation to undermine everything about our civilization while trying to portray herself as virtuous. And by the way, her parents were arrested for actually defrauding our immigration system, for trafficking, for doing H-1B fraud, and this woman has a series of articles about how her parents, who by the way pled guilty because they were guilty, are actually the real victims, and it's an injustice. So here you have this anti-American trash woman brought to this nation by immigration fraudsters. That's the whole reason they moved to Houston, Texas in the first place, trashing our system, trashing our nation, saying it's okay to steal from our nation. It's actually an act of resistance, and it's embarrassing. Oh, and by the way, according to the Daily Mail, when they confronted her about justifying stealing from regular, ordinary people, she went on a foul-mouthed tirade, really angry that they showed up to this woman's house because how dare you not respect her private property rights. And of course, this house was a $2.2 million Brooklyn brownstone. So family of scammers that defrauded our immigration system still allowed to remain in the United States of America. They got probation instead of being denaturalized and deported. This woman ends up owning a Brooklyn brownstone, and of course, she's endorsing communism, stealing from regular ordinary people, and later on, terrorism. Absolute scum through and through.
I was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and my parents wanted to do that so that I would have an American citizenship.
Cenk's nephew, and I played this clip before time and time again, is a classic case of an anchor baby of parents who defrauded our immigration system, who came into the United States of America specifically to give birth to him, only to take him back to Turkey because they wanted him to have automatic American citizenship. And if there is not a greater example of why the Supreme Court should overturn the current interpretation of the 14th Amendment than Cenk's nephew, I don't know what is. We should call this the Cenk's nephew decision and make sure no scumbag like him will ever be allowed to steal American citizenship ever again.
Would you steal from the Louvre?
Yes.
I would not be logistically capable of executing such a fact, but would I cheer on every news story of people that I see doing it? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I just want to point out the obvious, which is the reason why these people are endorsing stealing from the Louvre or stealing from any Western museum is because they are Western museums, because Europeans are great preservers of culture. They end up calling it theft of culture, but in reality, these people have no commentary at all whatsoever about how Islamic societies destroy artifacts like ISIS destroying ancient Sumerian artifacts or anything of the sort. Obviously, Cenk's nephew, a communist, and the communists are well known for destroying historical artifacts. And this is because these are third worldists. And this is not to be confused with third worlders, which both Cenk's nephew and the Gia woman absolutely are. When I say third worldists, I'm talking about the ideology that is anti-Western and always trying to victimize and uplift the third world. The host of this particular show, who, by the way, is also a Nepo baby. She is the child of the writer of Mouse. She is a natural-born American citizen, not a third worlder, but she's also a third worldist. Because again, it speaks to an ideology.
Would you steal from Whole Foods?
You want to go first?
Yes. And I have, under very specific circumstances. I think that stealing from a big box store, I'll just state my platform. Mm-hmm. It's neither very significant as a moral wrong, nor is it significant in any way as protest or direct action.
But of course, we transition from stealing American citizenship to just stealing from regular ordinary stores, and we hear a very classic explanation of why it's okay to do so from these individuals right here. And of course, it's because the corporation, so big, really, it doesn't hurt anybody for you to steal. Obviously, we had the Aladdin explanation because they're stealing out of need. But of course, what we end up finding out is that this Gia woman often frequently steals from Whole Foods, even though, again, she is not in need of that. And in addition to that, she's going to a high-end grocery store in the first place, even though she makes an excuse that she's doing so for someone else.
But I did steal from Whole Foods on several occasions, like... I've been involved in like a neighborhood mutual aid group since 2021. And so every week I would go get groceries for Miss Nancy, my now family friend who lived nearby, and she wanted to go to Whole Foods. She wanted food from Whole Foods. So I was like, okay, great. And so I'd be getting Miss Nancy all her groceries, and then I would finish and I'd be like, oh my God, 4 lemons. I forgot 4 lemons. And on several occasions I was like, I'm just going to go back, grab those 4 lemons and get the hell out. And
you should go to prison.
I know. You think they're going to ban me?
They should throw you in jail.
So make no mistake about it right here. These people are not advocating for any kind of moral action or anything of the sort. It's not about big corporations or anything like that. They are civilizational destroyers. They are third worldists who are making the case that it's great to undermine Western civilization in every possible regard. But even further than that, they're trying to undermine one of the basic foundations of any civilization. Any kind of civilized society has figured out from the dawn of time since we started becoming larger communities that if you allow theft to go unchecked, that's it. It's over. You can't do anything. You can't trade. You can't do business. It raises the cost of business. And this is something that always holds you back. This is why dating back to the original Hammurabi's Code, there are rules against stealing. Obviously, it's in the 10 Commandments. And again, it's because foundationally, you need this in order to function as a society. Because if you can't have basic trust, basic tenets of behavior, guess what? The whole thing falls apart. And these people actually advocate for that at different points in time, even though, again, if you were to try to steal from one of them, if you were to go to Cenk's nephew's house and steal his car or steal any of his property, he would lose his mind and demand that you be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But of course, when it's your stuff, when it's stuff that impacts your community, they're perfectly fine with it. And again, these people don't have to live with the consequences of this.
But I didn't feel bad about it at all.
Mm-hmm. And was part of it because of how you feel about Whole Foods as a corporation?
Yeah, it already felt like a bit of a compromise. Like at the time, I was like, I had not been to Whole Foods. I had a bit more sort of consumer discipline about where I was spending my money then. And I already felt like I was in the hole even by shopping there. And it certainly felt in a utilitarian sense. I was like, this is not a big deal.
Well,
now I've talked about this before a multitude of times about these big corporations and how, oh my God, they're exploiting everybody and it's okay to steal because you're in need and things are so expensive and these people have massive profits. But the thing is, the way that these companies end up generating profits, take Walmart for an example, is by selling you a lot of stuff at a very low margin. And again, they're profiting off the volume. So what ends up happening in communities that embrace the idea or lax the rules on theft is that these grocery stores, these full service grocery stores, they end up closing. They end up raising prices prior to that, spending money on security and whatnot, but eventually they end up closing. And what happens after these locations close? These same buffoons will come out and talk about food deserts, about the lack of grocery stores in these poor areas, even though again, it has nothing to do with poverty. It has everything to do with behavior. And the fact is, when you keep stealing from a store, you're going to drive them out of business. And then you're going to complain about higher prices in smaller little corner stores because those stores don't have the economies of scale, because you put out the stores that have the economies of scale out of business. A perfect example of this is the city of Chicago, and we covered this before, where all 4 Walmarts in that particular city closed at the same time. And this is because after 10 years of not making money at any of these locations, they were like, enough is enough. Theft is getting even worse at our locations, so we're not going to do it anymore. So these people, what they're advocating for is death by 1,000 cuts. But again, they live in fancy neighborhoods where there are Whole Foods, where there are Trader Joe's, high-end neighborhoods, so they don't suffer the consequences of this. When you practice these beliefs, you end up having to deal with it. And by the way, I will also add that they talk a lot about New York and New York City in particular. Retail theft in the city of New York has gone up exponentially since the Black Lives Matter riots, since the defunding of the police, since bail reform. You can see this chart right here from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And in fact, if you actually took out New York City from the entire country over this period of time, you would have seen a net decrease in retail theft nationwide, because it's really being carried by a bunch of blue cities in particular that gone soft on these type of crimes. And a perfect example of this is that in New York City, we talk about this a lot, 327 people are responsible for a third of the shoplifting arrests in the entire city. So these people are getting arrested over and over again. Again, they're practicing the policies that Cenk's nephew and this Gia woman and this other woman from the New York Times are advocating for. And the result of that is a loss of businesses, a shutting down of businesses, and significantly higher prices in the city of New York and a higher rate of increased prices than anywhere else in the country. Now, of course, there are other factors that play into that. They recently did a congestion pricing tax that actually charges regular ordinary vehicles only once per day, but it actually charges delivery trucks every time they enter into the congestion zone. So that leads to higher prices. You obviously have oppressive taxes, increases in taxes, higher rents that are due to the fact that these same politicians block building because it doesn't fit their personal agenda, and all these different things that get significantly worse due to the policies that these individuals advocate for. But again, they pretend like it's okay. They pretend like it's cool. They try to convince you that destroying your civilization, destroying one of the foundational pillars of that civilization will be good for you, and it's absolutely embarrassing. And again, it doesn't stop there.
When you feel this much anger and it doesn't feel like there's hope for it to be changed in a regulatory way, I think that's when you get to things like killing the CEO of United Healthcare and there being an outpouring of glee for murder online because it feels like finally someone can actually do something about healthcare. I think 40% of Gen Zers felt that murder was morally justified. But it's scary to be in a society where people feel that murder is morally justified. And I'm curious how we thread that line.
So look, we talked about this multiple different times on this channel, and I've made my position 100% clear for everybody out there in the audience. If you are excusing the alleged actions of Luigi Mangione in the murder of Brian Thompson because you don't like the healthcare industry, you're an immoral and depraved person, and you are endorsing far more violence and a far more destructive society than you can possibly imagine. And in addition to that, it's not like the murder of this guy actually changed anything for the better in this nation. In fact, all it did was show us how depraved huge portions of the American population actually are. But the thing is, this makes these people uncomfortable because they didn't actually accomplish any objective through this murder. By the way, Charlie Kirk gets mentioned here, and we get the downplaying of the left wing's broad celebration of his murder as well, which, by the way, that guy took inspiration, Tyler Robinson, from this particular guy, in that they both wrote stuff on the shell casings. They both marked the bullets with messages. Where do you think he got that idea from? But of course, we end up hearing from Cenk's nephew, the king of all idiots, the anchor baby, that should be justification alone for a revision of the 14th Amendment if the Supreme Court doesn't do their job. And he ends up coming up with an anti-concept in order to excuse away the broad support for murder.
Yeah. Engels wrote about the concept of social murder. And Brian Thompson, as the United Healthcare CEO, was engaging in a tremendous amount of social murder, the systematized forms of violence, the structural violence of poverty, the for-profit paywalled system of healthcare.
So you always know that these people have no good argument at all whatsoever when they bring up anti-concepts like social murder right here, as Cenk's nephew did, because again, they're just trying to deflect away from the issue at hand, which is a brutal and heinous murder that took place in downtown Manhattan that is inexcusable in every possible way by a depraved individual who, by the way, is being worshipped largely by the left wing and by many parts of the populist right, which is disgusting and more reprehensible, because if you're on the right, you should have a better moral foundation than that. So yeah, I'm more ashamed of those people than the people that I expect to support this murder. But of course, Cenk's nephew's like, oh, social murder. It's the same thing that they do when we're talking about retail theft and the damage that it has. You end up hearing from these people that, oh, it's priced in. They factor in some levels of theft at the store. Therefore, increasing theft to any degree is somehow not going to cause any problems for anyone else. So that's no big deal. And by the way, what about wage theft? What about this other issue? What about this other problem that has nothing to do with the topic that we're talking about? Because they're trying to pitch you on this idea that Devin Tracy made popular, that two wrongs makes a who cares. If I can name another wrong, or if you bring up a problem, I could say, here's another problem, and then we could just not talk about the problem. And it's embarrassing. It's humiliating. And again, the New York Times, supposedly the paper of record, is putting forward this kind of ideology on their platform with two disgusting and depraved individuals who should not be citizens in the United States of America.
Go back. You were talking about sort of what you do see as effective political protest. And recently a employee set fired Kimberly Clark warehouse as a protest.
Yeah.
Is that an effective form of political protest, or is that purely violent?
No, I found it, that you got to be tactical. I mean, I feel like Mike Davis wrote about this. It's like, it's not the action, it's the context in which it exists. And do I think that some sort of fire could hypothetically be framed within a collective action that is tactically useful? Yes. Does a disgruntled guy burning down the warehouse do it for me in terms of effective political action? Not at all. But
sabotage has played a formative role in labor union.
Everything.
Yeah, labor unions as well. But if it's conducted unilaterally, then it's entirely different.
And that's an individual action. And if he could have gotten away with it without being caught, I bet I didn't follow this case very closely, but it seemed like, like anything done by an individual on an emotional, on a kind of primarily emotional whim, that's not That's not the point. That's not the point.
Now, they then pivot to the guy who was arrested for setting that warehouse on fire in Ontario, California. And weirdly, they're against this particular guy. But of course, because these are elitist socialists, the reason why they're against this guy is not due to the fact that what he did was reprehensible, disgusting, depraved, that he could have killed other people, that he did so in an area that's near the Los Angeles area. Ontario, California is quite close and thus is prone to wildfires. So people could have lost their homes. It could have caused another devastating fire, which, by the way, many of the wildfires are started off by people incidentally setting a fire or purposely setting a fire. They say it's because there's no collective action in this, and that's what makes it really bad, because it's just an individual action, and therefore the actions of emotional individuals aren't as good as when you do the same kind of thing in the name of some kind of collective cause, even though, again, this guy did do it in the name of a collective cause. He videotaped him doing it. And by the way, I also want to say one of the funniest parts about that particular story was the fact that they interviewed a random Latino employee who had been there for a couple of weeks. And while this guy said his motivation was burning this down because they don't pay people enough to live, that random Latino employee was like, I was so happy at this job because the pay was really good.
How long have you been working there with the company?
About 3 weeks. Yeah. Just started making good money.
So again, the weakness here, the depravity is absolutely embarrassing. And by the way, if this host right here was born outside of the United States of America and became a naturalized citizen, she should never have been admitted to this country as well. We need to get rid of all these kinds of individuals because they're absolutely terrible and destructive for our nation. And again, we should not be choosing people that actively hate our country to become a part of our nation. But one of the things that I found absolutely fascinating about this is obviously they're depraved. Obviously, this is an example of luxury beliefs that they don't have to suffer through. And by the way, even though I'm doing pretty well off, the fact is I live in New York City and I have to suffer the consequences of dumb policies that these people advocate for because I still live in a regular, ordinary ass neighborhood. But recently, when I had to go to the pharmacy with the wife in order for her to pick up a prescription, we had to go to one specific pharmacy because all the other ones closed because of problems with theft. And guess what? The line was outrageous. It was insane. It was ridiculous. And yeah, this is what we have to deal with in the real world when we actually have to face the consequences of this. But these people, no consequences at all whatsoever actually dealt to them because again, they're living high on the hog, especially Cenk's nephew, who's a multi-millionaire.
And so I just wanted to end by asking you what's one thing that you think should be okay, but currently isn't okay?
So what's fascinating about the end of this particular show is that after they displayed an unbelievably ridiculous moral depravity, after they try to use buzzwords in order to obfuscate what they were trying to sell to the population, and by the way, this was rejected by their own audience, their own tiny audience. This video only has 3,000 views on their YouTube channel. They then decide to talk about the things that they find immoral, and again, it just goes to show you what big virtue signalers these people actually are, how ridiculous they are in every possible way, because theft and all these things that, you need to actually mitigate in order to have a society, those are perfectly okay. That's their innovative idea. But regular, ordinary things that are not harmful, that they actually enjoy, those things are bad. And this is a part of like the self-lashing where they end up guilting themselves for the luxuries that they enjoy every day, even though, again, they're not going to change their own behavior.
One thing that should be legal that isn't. It's interesting because I have to regularly explain this stuff to a small child, and have so thoroughly explained to her that some things are against the rules, but they're okay. And depending on who you are. And some things are not against the rules, but they're not okay. Like there's so many perfectly legal things I do regularly that I find mildly immoral, right? Like getting iced coffee in a plastic cup. Like I find that to be a profoundly selfish, immoral, collectively destructive action.
So normally I like to say that I don't hate individuals that I make video responses to, but I want to make something clear to everybody out there in the audience. I hate this woman because she's talking about indoctrinating a small child into her ridiculously stupid beliefs. And when asked about what's something that shouldn't be okay, that is okay right now, she's starts off by giving herself an own personal lashing and saying, oh my god, there's so many things that I find to be immoral that are perfectly okay in society, like getting iced coffee in a plastic cup. Now, I just want to point out that if she actually did care about this, if it wasn't a gigantic virtue signal, she could make coffee at home, or she could bring a reusable cup to any of these locations. They will gladly fill it up so that you wouldn't have plastic waste. But one of the reasons why you know that this is just third world, this absolute nonsense, is that 90% of the plastic waste that makes its way into the ocean comes from 7 rivers. And those 7 rivers are in 2 nations. They're in China and India. Do you see this woman ever calling that out? No, absolutely not. Because again, this is a luxury belief. She's not going to change anything about her behavior. She's just trying to virtue signal to these other absolute losers how wonderful a person that she is, even though again, I just explained to you how she could mitigate this, and how, by the way, this is comparatively not a big problem in any way, shape, or form. But she goes on.
You know, I think a lot of I have taken so many planes for so many pleasure reasons I have acted in so many selfish ways that are not only legal, but they're sanctioned and they're unbelievably valorized culturally.
So her other example is that she's taken so many planes for so many pleasure reasons. She's gone on so many vacations, and that's absolutely horrible. I mean, nobody should go on vacation. Now, of course, she's not going to change her lifestyle at all. She can afford to go on these vacations. That's why she chooses to do so. And she's like, oh, it's not me. Society valorizes me going on all these vacations and living this lifestyle, but it's actually immoral. If you follow me and you manage to scrounge together any money in order to take a vacation, you shouldn't do so, because getting on a commercial plane, absolutely terrible, disgusting, and depraved. It's something that you should never do. I mean, I'm not going to stop doing it, but oh, I feel so bad about it. I feel so terrible about it. I mean, if only her family never got on that plane from the Philippines and ended up in Canada, and then she never ended up in the United States of America. That would be amazing. That would actually solve a lot of our problems in this nation. But yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. And again, this is the slop that these people feed you as they look down upon you. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. But it gets even worse, because the thing that she thinks should be legal is something that 100% would make each and every one of you poorer if it was actually implemented.
And I think, I guess I don't really think of any laws. Maybe like things like blowing up a pipeline. Let's say that.
So terrorism is something that is illegal, that should be legal. And terrorism on our energy infrastructure is something that this woman supports because she's such a good environmentalist. I mean, she can't be bothered. Like, she doesn't have the time to buy a reusable cup that, by the way, some of these very stores like Starbucks, where she probably frequents to get that iced coffee, sell on location and you could use it. She also doesn't like the idea that she's traveled to so many fantastic places in order to enjoy her elitist lifestyle. But energy infrastructure, pipelines that lower the cost of delivering energy to you guys in the real world in this nation, that should be blown up. It should be legal to blow that up, because, oh my god, global warming, such a bad thing. Roll the clip of Greta Thunberg saying, how dare you?
How dare you?
As she also lives a luxury lifestyle. Again, it's not about the environment, it's about destroying the West. Make no mistake about it.
I really relate to what you were saying, Gia, of like, it is so hard to live ethically in an unethical society. And also there are so many moral compromises I make every day. I
do so many immoral things.
I am constantly acting in ways that don't align with my belief system, and constantly having to justify that from ordering in food when it's raining out. Like, there are just like so many moments when I'm like, my comfort is more important than someone bringing me food through the rain, and it doesn't feel good.
So look, I'm not going to make any commentary at all whatsoever about the particularly large woman on this New York Times panel, the host of this particular podcast, making her immoral thing that she does that should not be allowed related to food. But the idea that, oh my god, ordering DoorDash in the rain is just a part of society. I mean, we just shouldn't do it. I can't believe I'm prioritizing my comfort over the person who's delivering the food. First of all, just tip him, pay him. That's a job that this person is doing. But secondly, nobody is forcing you to order food at all whatsoever, let alone use the app. But again, these people pin all these things that, by the way, are non-issues on society, while constantly advocating for policies that undermine society. That's how depraved they are. That's how stupid they are. And then dumbass person who immigrated to the United States of America from Canada is going to follow up by saying, oh my God, the advertisements make us do it.
Right. But it is part of living. I mean, no one's making me do that, but it is part of the way in which we live in our society.
And it's so incentivized. I mean, it's like splashed all over the subway ads. It's just like, ladies, be selfish tonight, you know? Like it's wild. Yeah.
Shut up. Shut your stupid mouth. It's like, oh my God, it's advertised all over the subway. It's like, ladies, be selfish tonight. Like, what are we supposed to do? How are we not supposed to be selfish? And by the way, this woman used to write for Jezebel at one point in time. She might still write for Jezebel. What do you think that feminist rag promotes constantly? Female selfishness with no accountability. So yeah, shut the hell up with this absolute nonsense. You guys are the epitome of being selfish and love of self and the worship of self. So yeah, this is a perfect example of that, and it's embarrassing.
What is one thing that shouldn't be okay, but currently is?
So many things. Extraction of surplus labor value.
Great, you went really silly with it. I appreciate that.
Exploitation.
Yeah, anything above Mao. I think New York should charge people to park on the street.
So, of course, she asked something that is okay, that shouldn't be okay. Cenk's nephew says, oh, extraction of surplus labor value. Again, more communist garbage. And then this woman says we should charge everybody for parking on the street at any point in time. Again, showing us the elitist that she absolutely is, because this complete anti-car position that these people hold is by definition elitist. And again, it's just embarrassing in every way. And by the way, she also can't even cling to her own values on that.
Which, I mean, I park on the street.
So yeah, this is an absolutely depraved and ridiculous episode of this New York Times podcast. The guests are absolutely horrific, as expected from Cenk's nephew, but this woman, Gia, is just as bad, if not worse, in this particular appearance. I'll link the whole thing if you want to check it out, but I'm going to leave it right here. And as usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness of this podcast episode and the endorsement of theft and all sorts of other moral depravities. Till next time.